So you have started using the Efficient Brewing system. The first thing you would have done is gone into the brewery setup and added all of your equipment and set the name. And so now we actually have some equipment to be able to schedule some beers. So we'll go back to home. And so now we still have nothing in our schedule and no details at all about our brewery or what we actually brew at this brewery. So the next part is actually adding some beers. And so these are the beers that we want to brew, and so these are the beer styles. Now, whenever you go into the update option, you always have you want to select the start date. And so this is because whenever we create a schedule, we want to create a schedule from a particular point in time. This could be in the past, could be in the future, but we need to select a point in time where we want to modify the schedule or the details of the schedule. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it as the 4th of March, which is today's date. And so now we end up with an empty page. So we have no beers, we haven't added anything, so there's nothing that can be brewed at this brewery. So now what we want to do is add some beers to it. So let's just add, first of all, we'll put in an IPA. And so the IPA will have some fermentation time. In our case, I'm just going to add some numbers which will be nice for this example and say it's going to ferment for 10 days. So this is the amount of time that we're going to leave it in the fermentation vessel. One thing to note here is that the fermentation time is actually a minimum. So that means that so we could stay in the fermentation vessel longer than that. And so in our scheduling, that is actually taken into account. So the reason why that might be come into play is that if you remember from our brewery setup, we had particular work days. So if you happen to not work weekends and the fermentation time would actually see that your beer would finish on the weekend, it would say in the schedule that it's actually going to stay until Monday because you wouldn't be taking it out before it's actually finished. The fermentation time here is going to be a minimum time, and so it can stay in there longer than that time in the scheduling. So we hit update, and so now we have one beer in our beer list. So this is a beer style that we want to brew, and you can be more specific than just IPA. You could have your own beer names that you wanted to have there for particular styles. So this doesn't have to be just a broad style. It can actually be very specific to what you want to brew, and then the times can be very specific to what you want to brew as well. So let's do another one. So the next one, let's say we want to brew a pale ale. And again, so this will have a fermentation time. We'll just make this slightly longer, just to make the example a little bit more interesting. And so I'll hit update. And so now we have our 2 beers in our list. So then let's do something a bit more with some conditioning time. So now let's say we have a Pilsner. And so for this one, we're going to have a fermentation time of 15 days. It potentially would be longer than that for a Pilsner. The reason I've made it 15 days is that when we go on to other videos to show how to schedule, the shorter time will actually make the example a little bit better to look at. And so now this one will actually also put that into a conditioning vessel. And so that would stay in the conditioning vessel for 20 days. So this is just an additional piece of equipment that we have available to us within our brewery setup. If we didn't have the conditioning vessel in our brewery equipment, then we wouldn't be able to add any conditioning time because it just is not possible to do. So again, we hit update, and now we have a Pilsner with fermentation time of 15 days, and then we have a conditioning time of 20 days. And just one last option. So we have now a lager, and so we'll say that this is going to ferment for 20 days, and again, it is going to be in the conditioning vessel for another 20 days after that. So finally, we hit update, and now we have our full set of beers. Now, in order to make sure that this is saved within our system, we need to make sure we hit the Save Changes button, and then that will be saved. Now, one final note, if we decided that actually, for example, the pale ale is not correct, we actually made a mistake, and we wanted to actually not ferment for 12 days, but actually was supposed to ferment for 13 days. So we can go here, select the beer type ID, which is on the left here. So we've got some ID, we've picked number 2. We could pick any of them, but we'll pick number 2 for pale ale. And so we want to extend this fermentation time out to 13 days. We hit update, and so now it's been updated in our beer list. And then we actually need to save our changes. So there we have it. This is what we do in order to create our beer list. And then the next step after this will be creating a brew plan, which will then be used to produce a schedule.